Hey everybody, welcome back to the Week in Horror, October 20th through the 26th. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm JL.
I'm Eugene.
I'm Alex.
This has been an amazing week. I don't know what you guys have been up to, but my wife is currently doing a kind of, she always does an October horror marathon where she does a horror movie every single day, one that she has not seen. And she has seen some really crazy shit as of recent, but I wanted to give a shout out, and if you guys haven't seen it, to a new one that just hit Netflix called In the Tall Grass.
All right.
Ooh.
Which was written by Stephen King and his son. It was based on a novella that was written by Stephen King and his son Joe Hill. And fantastic, creepy little cosmic horror film. Really, really neat. Leave it to Stephen King to make grass scary. So,
Unlike Midnight Shyamalan.
The happening.
No, he said scary, not funny.
But it was a really, really creepy horror film. Strongly recommended that. What have you guys been up to?
I also started In the Tall Grass and then fell asleep because it was way past my bedtime when I started it.
Way to shit on my recommendation.
No. It was really good. It was super creepy, and I got up to a point where I'm kind of upset that I fell asleep because then my brain just kind of made the rest of the movie while I was sleeping, and that might have actually probably been worse than the movie. So I have to go back and watch it just to reassure myself there's not demons in my room. And but yeah, so far so good. I'm really excited to finish that one up. And like you said, your wife is doing horror movies, and I've been searching through everything on Netflix horror-wise. And I've seen a couple of these new style TV shows that they're doing, where they're breaking down like short horror films, and these Creeped Out is one. There's another one that I want to start. I think it's called Nightmare.
Are you talking about the 2-second horror films?
No, I did watch the
two-sentence horror films.
2-sentence horror films. I watched that whole series. That was great. So if you're looking for some stuff to binge this month, that's definitely they've got some good stuff on Netflix this month for sure.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I actually went back and revisited. I've been doing some study on some modern horror films. The movie The Witch that came out like 2015, 16.
Can't bring myself to watch it. It looks too scary.
It is creepy. A lot of the filmmaking techniques they use, because they used almost all natural lighting, so it's all just sun and like candlelight with a really, really high-powered camera for it. So, and they did a ton of historical research. So they built the buildings, the costumes, and everything is like completely accurate to like the 1600s, the Pilgrims. And, you know, it's one of those type of movies I love, where it's not that many jump scares, it's not that many kills, but just the entire atmosphere. Like, I've never looked at like basically like grass, since we've been talking about it, and been like, man, that pile of grass over there scares the shit out of me.
I watched The Witch, and yes, super creepy, slow burn, creepy film. But almost as twisted was the kind of like the depiction of the Puritan faith and the characters in themselves, and how that kind of mindset played into the horror as much as, you know, the supernatural going ons. I've never been so fucking scared of a goat in my life.
Yeah. Which adds to me one of like the most like gnarly kills. I won't say who.
Oh,
but yeah, you know who I'm talking about. I've never seen somebody killed by goat like that.
I didn't see that shit coming. I really didn't.
Damn it! Now I gotta go watch it.
So that's been what I've been up to this past weekend.
I love it. I'm getting to live kind of vicariously through my wife, because so far she's seen Candyman for the first time.
Nice.
And I got to go back and watch that Tony Todd classic. She watched Chud for the first time.
Okay.
She had never seen it before. So getting to kind of go back and watch both classic horror and those cheesy horror classics that I hadn't seen in forever. So I really hope I get to show her like Basket Case, and see what she thinks of that one.
That'd be good.
So,
Yeah, I think she'll love it.
but yeah, a lot of fun. All right, well, this week we have a veritable bloodbath of classic horror to get into, so we'll kick this thing off. Eugene, what do you got?
All right, so starting with the classics right here, we got a movie called Night Monster that debuted October 20th, 1942, right? This is actually a remake of a film called Dr. X from the early 30s, and it is directed by Ford Bede, and it is actually billed first by Bela Lugosi, who played the original Dracula, but they actually billed him first, but he actually only plays a butler in it. So they're trying to use his name for name recognition. But it actually does star Ralph Morgan, Irene Hervey, and Dawn Porter. And so what the movie's about takes place in this like swampy region, right? And you have a couple of these doctors and these scientists, and they go and they get together for dinner, and they talk about this new discovery of this Egyptian skeleton that comes about. Well, as they go and they kind of start talking about it, they start talking about kind of like who can see it, who cannot see it. And then as night falls, the doctors start getting killed off one by one. And so the doctors and scientists start getting killed off, and they start doing this investigation with who's doing it, kind of like one of those murder mystery dinner things. And I don't want to spoil the end because it actually has a nice twist. And the killer is not exactly who you think it is. It does have a little bit of a supernatural element to it. But going off of this movie, Night Monster, we start getting into a lot of stuff in terms of, what was it, the pre-Hale code, right? Haley code?
The Hays Code?
Yeah, the Hays Code, the Hay Code.
Yeah.
So this movie actually ran into a lot of issues with the Hays Code at the time, which was the predecessor to the Motion Picture Association, which regulates all the films, where it's rated R, PG-13, all those ratings that we're familiar with today. They had a different rating system back then, and basically during the 1940s, everything was pretty much like, no, you cannot talk about sex, you could not talk about marriage, childbirth, you cannot talk about religion in a bad way, you cannot talk about, and this heavily affected a lot of films like Casablanca and Maltese Falcon and some of the other ones that came out in the 1940s.
Otto Preminger was a huge opponent to that, to the whole Hays Code and the whole, basically what he saw as censorship in films, and kind of led to its downfall by pushing, but he pretty much pushed the envelope in everything that he did. Legendary director who pretty much single-handedly killed the production code and led to the creation of the MPAA and the rating system we know today.
And
a lot's changed.
And you start getting, like, they kept pushing it stronger and further, to the point where you had directors like Alfred Hitchcock who were just like, I'm not going to follow this. When he released Psycho, he was basically, I'm not going to do this. And they're like, well, fine, let your movie fail. And then obviously Psycho became a huge thing, and people started realizing that, the code's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, because if they didn't fall in line, because I think it was that there was an asshole named Bream, who I think it was or Breen or some shit like that, who was pretty much it was like a Catholic layperson who was pretty much just laying down the law across the board, and it took revolutionaries like Preminger, like Hitchcock, to really kind of shut the door in his face and be like, "Fuck you, we're gonna do it, even if we don't get certification to go to theaters." And thank God for people who saw ahead.
Yes.
And it was television that really kind of killed it, because when you can get the same thing on TV as you can get at the movie theaters got to kind of draw people back. And so, yeah, the advancements in technology kind of killed that thing. Yeah, so archaic, so puritanical.
Oh, yeah. It's like Prohibition, we're going to do the morality, the country should be like this, country should be like this, and then everybody kind of starts going for the what's not moral, leaning towards.
Well, and
You
then
gotta wonder
that had a lot to do too with like after that you mentioned prohibition, and just like in any sort of prohibition, people are going to make their way around it, but then coming out of it, those elements became a lot stronger in film because they're allowed to, and then you had this push and pull between movie and TV and advertising starting to pick up, and so all those moral issues that nobody wants to talk about kind of became cool, and then you start getting into the 60s, and it starts getting even weirder in the 70s. A lot of weird stuff came out of that whole ban on being able to just be a human being, and like you said, trying to control it. Communism wasn't working out. Like that whole thing was bound to fail, but it produced very controversial films and filmmakers being able to express themselves. So it's kind of a boom after that.
So you got to wonder, because the nature of America being based on puritanical values, and we still see that today with how American audiences respond to nudity and kind of there's still taboo subjects. We like to think that there aren't, but there still are, and they're slowly but surely going away. But back in the day, so you're talking about in the 1930s, I think the Hays Production Code kind of fell. They started kind of enforcing it about mid 34. So America was fresh out of World War I, and it kind of gave rise, then you have like the Roaring Twenties, and then this kind of, after we got out of World War I, the kind of sigh of relief that the war was over, the economy was booming, and people got a little bit looser, because you had flapper girls, then you had speakeasies, and all kinds of fun stuff, and people were partying a little too hard, and then those people in power who kind of supported those puritanical values, and I guess probably erring on the side of profit, because they didn't want to dissuade too many people to come and see films, kind of put the hammer down. It was kind of like a gut response, or a knee-jerk response to the people opening up in the 20s. And then that kind of hit with entertainment, hit with this stuff like the Hays Production Code, and then we see that again and again. We see like the 50s, the tight knit family unit of the 50s, the beginning of the nuclear family, and then the 60s happened, and then of course it's just like kind of an ebb and flow, and we see all genres, not just horror, but all genres begin to kind of reflect the state of the country in what they put out and what they're willing to put out. And I think horror is unique among that, because they're so willing, horror directors are so willing to push that envelope every single time. Kind of like, this is what we need, this is what we're missing. And it always kind of reminds people and brings people back to earth in that level of entertainment.
Well, there's an exciting element about it, because we sometimes we like to do things that aren't, they're a little bad, they're a little edgy. People went to speakeasies for a thrill kind of thing. And I think with horror movies, when you start pushing that, and all of a sudden it's like, ooh, you're not supposed to make a movie about it, but somebody did now want to go see it, it kind of adds to that little extra element of it. That kind of look is like, okay, I'm kind of fighting the social norm. I'm kind of fighting the rich wigs that tell me what I should do. I'm being in rebellion. So it's like a rebellious act to see these movies.
Yes. That era was all about rebellion for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I think it was the deep sigh of relief. We were out of World War I. Our soldiers had come home. Everything was calming down. Then, of course, post-war, the economy was just exploded. People had money, and then
boom, Hitler.
You throw in prohibition. And that kind of like put the stamp on things, and people kind of reacted that way. And I think the Hays Production Code was kind of another kind of just them trying I want to say the proverbial them, but those in power wanting to put the moral. It's hard to say. Well, I honestly believe they want to say that it was the moral that these were films of moral turpitude, that they were protecting the moral hygiene of the country. They did not want to disseminate or spread immoral material. But I'm inclined to believe that this actually fell in the way of profits, that the vast majority of the country, the people who go to movies and people who saw movies, did not have this niche mentality of, you know, going out and partying at night, or this, you know, enjoying these kinds of films, these kind of avant-garde or exploitative films. And so I believe they were erring on the side of profit, that
Control the competition.
Keeping films clean would keep people going to the theater, would keep people going and buying movie tickets, would keep box office up, because they wouldn't have to worry about, oh, am I going to see something tawdry in this movie? You know, something that's going to make me feel uncomfortable, that's not going to make me want to go back to the theater. And if not equally, then more so, I think it was on the side of money. It was profit. They saw profit in cleanliness and control.
I agree.
That's fair.
I do. It always comes down to profit. Always.
So Night Monster, do you think that movie, going back to 1942, do you think that movie stretched to the limits of that law? Do you think they were pushing the envelope on that movie? Or do you think that kind of stayed within the guidelines of this, you know, afraid to not be able to produce?
I think the interesting question would be, if they didn't have that guideline, what would they have done? Because just going back and doing some research on it, they had a couple things that were kind of borderline with it, but you can tell like the rules already been in effect for so long, and everybody's writing to it, everybody's biting by to it. So it's like somebody today, I have to make a G-rated movie, so I have to do it this way. And then the good question would be, well, okay, you have a G or PG rated movie, now you can make it rated R. What would you do?
Good point. And I mean, coming to like nowadays, I just went and saw The Addams Family in theaters today with my daughter, and having a kid and going to some of these movies now, like you kind of watch out for stuff like that. You know, having a family, and it's a lot easier for me to go to a movie with my kid. Now that we've got like the MPA and like all the ratings that are in effect, you know, you kind of trust that. And I went and saw this movie today, kind of worried about how it was going to go over, and they have like a really good like adult child balance in those movies nowadays, and I think they're kind of finally coming around to wrapping some of that stuff up into this perfect little, how can we make it better for everybody? Because like I said, I've got a kid, it's hard to get to a movie. I don't want to go to a movie and be like, is it going to be bad, is it going to be good, worried the whole time. I want to enjoy it, and just having that rating system in effect, rather than being like, no, you can't show any of this, you can't show this. Well, okay, you can show a little, but be like, hey, you probably shouldn't let your kid go to this until they're about 14. I think that really, I'm glad that it worked out more this way and not the other way, because our society, I think, would probably be a little different if they would have kept those laws in effect.
I agree. It's the fact that you can make pretty much anything you want to make today, and then just realize it's going to fall under a certain rating, and your viewership is going to be based on what that rating is. That's a much better system.
I agree.
Absolutely.
So we can move ahead from that terrible law that would not have allowed this movie to be produced. One day and 63 years later, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and a whole bunch of people from not anywhere near America got together and starred in this movie. This is, of course, Doom, released in 2005. Being born in the 90s and growing up with the original Doom all the way up until you can still play it, this movie is based off of Doom 3, which was released, I believe, a year before the movie came out. And everybody was so enthralled by Doom 1 and 2 for so many years, they thought they could get away with making a first-person shooter type movie because video games were super big and Call of Duty and everybody was super into it. And then they come out with this movie, Doom, which, as much as I like to harp on movies like this, it was a cool concept for the time. There was a lot of shooter movies out, action movies and stuff, and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson being such a big name already in everybody's household, it was terrible to see. It was terrible to see him let himself be that way in a movie, I guess. I don't know. I don't even know how to explain, because it was one of his first big
Okay.
movies.
Now, the film itself, and
I'm so torn on this.
and Dwayne Johnson actually made the crack during some presentation or some awards deal that he commented. He said, "Hey, did anybody see Doom?" He's like, "Okay, don't worry about it. No one else did either." And
You know what? That was like he loved the movie up until people started talking shit about it, and then he started like, yeah, I can't believe I played in that movie.
which is a shame because first off, you had Dwayne Johnson, you had Carl Urban,
Mm-hmm.
okay,
John Grimm. If you've ever played in the series of the game or anything, John Grimm,
Rosamund Pike. Oh, I'm sorry, and I love her to death. I really do, but she did not have her American accent down.
no,
Just said, and that just was really off because Carl Urban had a totally Midwestern.
except not. If you go back and watch it now and really listen to it, there's so many parts of that movie where he is straight up New Zealand, like straight up.
But these guys, these guys sold those parts. Okay, they believed in it. They went hardcore. I enjoyed I enjoyed several parts of it. I personally, the first person shooter scene was not handled as well as it should have been, in my personal opinion.
Agreed.
But I mean, you know as well as I do that the first time Dwayne Johnson picks up the BFG 9000, okay, you know it's going to be on at that point. Okay, that was a highlight. It was picking up the big fucking
got
gun.
the BFG,
the BFG 9000. It's like, this is going to be sick. We wouldn't have lines like, "I need soldiers," shit like that. Just the way Dwayne Johnson delivered that. "Mutinous insurrection is punishable, eyebrow, by death."
So this movie, just for reference, it takes place in 2046, and you can kind of gather that just by the beginning. It says 2026, and so the premise of this movie is just basically these space marines shoot themselves through this ancient technology to Mars, and this old city, I guess you could say, on Mars, where these scientists are doing experiments and something goes horribly wrong. And just like any great movie from that era, it followed the very, go in, all of a sudden there's a monster, shoot, everybody dies, and then, it was super typical. But then they tried to throw that first person shooter scene, and it was cool that you brought that up, how it wasn't done well, because it took them 14 days to shoot that sequence.
Oh my God.
So
Wow.
they had so much time on it. It still came out just so really, you could have done
very.
They did
very
better in '92 in the video game thing. But think about it this way too. They offered The Rock the position, or not the position. I'm sorry, the role of John Grimm. And so he turned that down because he felt Sarge was a much more interesting role, and he actually took a pay cut. Carl actually ended up taking a higher pay than The Rock on that one. It was the whole thing. He said it was more interesting, and so can you imagine anybody else in that role? Who else could you put in that role?
I don't see anybody who could deliver those lines and make them even a quarter believable.
He's the first.
Okay, so I'm going to bring up one scene, if you can remember this, when The Rock shoots, Carmack, the scientist?
Carmack. Yeah.
Carmack. And so when he looks at Samantha, and she, his condition is irreversible. You don't know that. And he's like,
Dr. Carmack's condition is irreversible because Dr. Carmack's condition is that he's dead.
It was great. But so, fun fact though, they originally scripted and actually had Arnold Schwarzenegger was going to be Sarge in that movie. And there was an incident that happened. It was a tragic incident. I don't know many details on the story, but apparently two kids were messing around pretending they were Doom guy, messing around with a chainsaw, and one of the kids ended up getting clipped and killed. And so Arnold Schwarzenegger's team pulled him from the movie because of it. And so, like, there was just, like, a whole mess at the beginning. Who the hell is going to play Sarge? Like, it was, okay, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then The Rock was already scripted as John, and then it got all flipped around. And so it's like, okay, let's get this straightened out. And so that incident actually happened in, like, 1999. So the film was supposed to come out before that. And then, yeah, it was just a mess. And so they finally got it out. You get into that movie, and the first scene you see is, like, Mars, and you can tell it's paper mache. And then when the door's getting ripped open at the beginning, you can see, like, the drawing lines on where they animated it. And so it was terrible in so many ways, but it was kind of cool. I kind of liked it.
It was so bad it was good. I think some good one-liners. That fight between Carl Urban and The Rock at the end I thought was pretty sweet. It's not.
What are you gonna do? He's got the BFG pointed at him.
I've got 1 round.
I've got 1 round. No, yeah. He's like, how many you got? Half a clip. I got 1 round.
I've got 1 round. As only The Rock could deliver. I think The Rock saved that movie. It would have been absolutely abysmal if it hadn't been anyone but him. And I think it's just because he loves what he does so much and dedicates everything he's got to bring it to life. I mean, sometimes you read a script, and I can speak from experience. Sometimes you read a script and you're looking at the lines, you're like, what the fuck is this dialogue? What the hell is going on? And it's like, not all of us have the balls to be like Gary Busey in Silver Bullet. Because in that werewolf flick, Gary Busey ad-libbed like all of his lines. Like,
yeah.
He totally went off script and he was good enough that Stephen King and the director both was like, the shit he's coming up with is better than what we wrote. Hell yes, let him go. Just let him do what he wants. So, and few of us have those kind of balls. Of course, few people have the balls of Gary Busey. But
True. I like how you bring up dialogue too. So, just fun fact, Simon Pegg was actually asked to come in and like polish the dialogue on that movie, and he totally turned it down. The beginning. So like there was so many Simon Pegg, you got Arnold Schwarzenegger, like there was so many things that could have gone differently with that movie. Like you said, I think The Rock definitely saved that movie.
It's the same thing as you think about like Will Smith turned down the role of Neo in The Matrix. So it couldn't be happy accidents.
Exactly. Yeah, for some.
And that whole movie was a happy accident.
Then you might accidentally play in the movie, so you got to deal with that. But overall, I think being from that time period when Call of Duty and all that stuff was coming out, I think it was a bold move, and I think if you've got an hour and a half or 2.5 hours, I can't even remember now. It's definitely worth a watch.
I was totally excited to see it. I went to the premiere and I actually got a Doom hat that I still have sitting here in my office. So actually, it was too small and it didn't fit my enormous 20-pound head. But I still have it sitting around here somewhere in my collection. But yeah, that was sweet. I remember I was excited in the theater, and then like 5 minutes walking out, I was like, "What the fuck was that noise?"
At the very least, it's not the worst video game movie ever made.
Not the worst video game movie ever made. This is true.
Yes.
Probably helps that, like, it probably helps too that Doom was like it's still even considered one of the best video games ever. They've made like, 7, 8, 9 of them, still making them now. So
they did not pull a Super Mario Brothers on that.
Yeah, Doom actually, I think Doom, it was either this year or last year, got inducted into the Video Game Hall of Fame. So
that's cool.
Well, going on from that craziness, one year earlier, we got on October 22nd, 2004, and this one still haunts me quite a bit. It was back when The Ring kicked off the whole American adaptation of J-horror, of a Japanese horror coming over. We got The Grudge on October 22nd, 2004. And for those not familiar, The Grudge this was an American remake of a Japanese horror film called Ju-on, and it's based on the Japanese concept that if a person dies, and in a violent and terrible manner, then a curse can be born from the violence of their death. And that curse can inhabit a space, like a home, or the area where that person died. And anybody who comes into contact with that curse is they themselves cursed, and that curse will follow them, bringing them nothing but misfortune and eventual death. And this concept is terrifying in thought, and but the film itself, I think, is one of the most successful adaptations of a J-horror film. This one's the director from the original came over and actually worked on this movie, and the original family that starred in it in the Japanese versions actually came over and reprised their roles in the American version. And it initially starred Sarah Michelle Gellar of Buffy fame, who played a nurse who eventually comes into contact with the spirits of the house. Also starred Jason Behr, Bill Pullman, Clea Duvall, and of course brought over Ryo Ishibashi and Takako Fuji and Yuya Ozeki and Takamashi Matsuyama, and all reprising their roles the previous, all reprising their roles from the original franchise. This film, it's still kind of, this was 15 years ago, and this film still kind of haunts me because there are some moments in this, the camera work alone and the lighting were so significant in creating an atmosphere of unrelenting dread, because you didn't have to be. That was the thing that got me, is that if you came into contact with these spirits or with this curse, this thing followed you no matter where you went. So just because you got out of the house doesn't mean that you got away. And so the unrelenting terror of being chased by something, I hadn't experienced that. I hadn't experienced that in film, really, and this one got me. Still kind of freaked out about it to this day.
Oh yeah. I remember seeing this, and the cinematography. You never feel at ease. Like, so there are certain movies where, like, during the daytime or something like that, like, oh well, nothing's gonna happen, and then it's like the night, kind of like Paranormal Activity is like that. This movie, you're on the edge of your seat the entire time. Anything can happen at any moment, and then when it cuts to at night, it's even worse, kind of thing. And the fact that it followed you, and there's a certain rule or law, things that look human that don't move in a human way naturally freak us out. So they used this and they played into it. So the movements of the way the ghost moved, the camera work, the way these ghosts were revealed, it's just creepy. It's unsettling. Like, you see the big bad in front of you, and it's still creeping you out.
Oh, fuck, I'm getting chills.
I was going to say, what, you don't walk down the stairs like that?
I'm telling you, man, I was sitting to myself, I was transfixed by this film, but that whole, there was a sequence of events when these murders, these deaths begin taking place, and there's this detective who begins investigating the crimes, thinking that there's a human element, unaware of what's actually going on. And there's this moment when he's reviewing security footage in a hospital, and they're tracking Sarah Michelle Gellar's character because they believe that she's the one behind everything. And she's running from the ghost, one of the ghosts, because there are actually three. But she's running from the ghost, and there's this. It's hard to describe. She's running down the hallway, and he's watching the security camera, and everything looks as normal. And all of a sudden, you get the kind of light flicker, because he's in the dark. He's in the kind of like the dark security office, and the only light is coming off of the screen, and the screen is really bright. And so you got this really, really front, blast of light in the front, and then the ghost comes walking down the hallway, visible on the screen, and then the camera, the screen of the security monitor starts flickering, and the lights start kind of like flickering, and everyone's kind of like, what the fuck is going on? And then the ghost just kind of walks down the hallway, and once it breaks frame, everything returns back to normal. The resolution on the security feed goes back to normal, and then everything's good. But then all of a sudden, it flicks again, and then this shadow starts moving up into the frame of filling the security camera. And the notion of that blackness coming in, and then those eyes opening in it, that was that shook me. And there was an almost, I want to say there was an almost terrible beauty to, well, because when we find out what happened and what created the events, and now I don't want to give too many spoilers away if you haven't seen it, but in essence, the patriarch of this Japanese family, the traditional Japanese family, loses his mind for reasons I won't go into so you can see the film, but loses his mind and murders his family. And the violent methods in which they died, it was his wife and his little boy. And the violent methods in which they die is what created the curse. And they shot it. They shot the cinematic breakdown of this epic level of violence. And there was this kind of horrible tranquility to what was going on in the house when that went down. And, because they brought the original actors who played these roles in Ju-on in the Japanese version, and they sold it. And it was, you feel an almost instant connection and almost a disconnect as well from the culture, from the Japanese culture, and the view of honor and honor of the family and honor of the family name. But you connect with the violence, but you totally dissociate from the reasoning or the I would say the motives behind it, simply because why would you? I can understand this, but why this? And I think the movie is brilliant at keeping you off kilter in that respect. It's like you can get here, but you have this wall that we can't get by.
And another element that it has, and we've talked about it in a couple of episodes in the past, is that there's a certain realism to it. Where it's like, I know Michael Myers and Jason isn't going to come and pop up here, but the thing is like, we know violent things do happen in the real world, and, they happen here and they happen there, and a lot of these residents, you'll have some kind of a brutal murder or something like that, and the house gets cleaned up and sold to somebody else, and they live there. And a lot of times we live in places where we don't know the past kind of thing. We don't know what could have happened there. And, we know this, but we kind of keep it in the back of our mind, and we kind of carry on, unless, you build your own house or something like that. And so it's so easy to get tied into, because what if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time? What if you go to get to the wrong location, and then you have this thing that's after you that you can't shoot it, you can't run away from it, it can get to you at any moment, at any time. So it takes that feeling of safety from you.
Home sweet home.
It's interesting you brought that, because the two films that obviously take heavy inspiration, It Follows, I think was strongly inspired by the concept of the inescapable curse, the consistent need to run to survive, but also a gem that I love, 1408.
Based on my God! When did we get to do that one?
Stephen. It was based on the short story by Stephen King. 1408, the character, actually, I'm going to reference the movie, because both the short story and the movie were fantastic. I actually think the movie was better in some respects, just because Sam Jackson, I fucking love him.
I can agree on that aspect.
Yeah.
But the writer Enslin, played by John Cusack, had that moment where he's talking into his recorder, because he's a writer. He basically dictates his own notes, and he was talking about how hotels are invariably creepy places, because you don't know how many people who has slept on that bed, how many of them have been sick, how many of them have been crazy, how many of them have died. The history of where you're at now. You're just wantonly walking into this room and accepting it as your own, having no concept of what went on around you. or what horrors existed in this room, and it's so clean and tidy and everything's nice, so we just accept it at face value. But the history of things, especially when you start digging into it and churning it up, can create some really creepy tension. You never know what you're walking into.
Absolutely, you never know the the energy or aura or something like that of a particular spot.
Oh God! Now I'm looking behind me and shit.
Well, stop it. That's a really good point on the whole human element of it being. Yeah, thanks. Gotta go. It's cool that you bring the whole human element into it, because like you said, you've got the scare, you can't get away from it. It's just there. You've walked into this thing that you know nothing about, and you can't really explain it. And in like horror films, a huge part of my horror film, I guess, obsession is like, I like to go in and watch these things and be like, well, if you just did this, you get away. And so a good horror film to me is somebody that kind of takes like everything into consideration. Okay, you've got these scary killers or something. You can avoid these situations, but then when you get into that spirit realm, you start talking about curses. You just can't. It's gripping. And then at the end of this particular film, not to give the ending away, but you sympathize. And so, like, you're terrified out of your skull. You're looking behind you. You've got that feeling somebody's watching. Hey, this stuff could happen to me. It changes your whole, your psyche in a way. Because, like you said, seeing the way that the boy moves, and, like, that stuff will stick with us for, that was in 2004. And it's still scaring us as grown men, like, that psyche play, and then at the end you sympathize. It really kind of like, it made this film absolutely one. If you've seen it, you'll never forget it. It's something that'll come with and stay with, just like it. It follows. That curse stays with you. This movie would stay with you.
Mm-hmm.
Break your brain kind of movie.
Well, and thankfully, we've got coming out of Sony Pictures. There's going to be a remake or a reboot of The Grudge coming in 2020. January 3rd, 2020, we get the official remake on it, and I'm actually excited about it because Sam Raimi is producing it.
Good.
So we've got some good names. Sam Raimi, Robert Tappert, and Takashige Ichise are all behind it, and they brought in one of the co-writers on it was what was his name? Nicholas Pesh, who wrote The Eyes of My Mother, which was a terrifying little black and white film that you can see on Netflix as well. But with such heavyweight names behind it and such imagination behind it, I think we're going to get a really, really creepy reboot.
I hope so.
But fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. We get to revisit The Grudge in 2020.
Yay! Something else to have nightmares about.
Shake that one off.
God.
All right. Okay. So we got moving on to our next film after, me constantly checking my shoulder and stuff like that, as I sit here by myself in the dark. So the next film we're talking about came out October 24th, 1986, and is by the creators of Reanimator, that cult film. It's a film called From Beyond. And
yes, I fucking love H.P. Lovecraft.
H.P. Lovecraft. There should be more adaptations of it. Should be. The film was directed by Stuart Gordon, who did direct Reanimator, right? And then it goes and it stars Jeffrey Combs, Barbara Crampton, Ken Force, and Ted Sorrell, if I can pronounce those names correctly. And what it is it starts off with Dr. Edward starts developing a resonator. And what the machine does is he's trying to see beyond our normal form of perception, because in like light spectrum, we can only see so much. So there's so many things that could be happening around us that we don't even know, which is kind of creepy to begin with, now that we think about it. And so he starts developing the machine, and he goes and he starts bringing back this creature, and the creature goes and it kills him, and they find his decapitated body. And so they start investigating into it, and they start turning on this machine, and they start having different reactions. All of a sudden, the doctor starts coming back, and the girl who's investigating kind of starts liking it, and they're like, no, we need to destroy the machine, and then they kind of start staying in the house with it, and all this other kind of stuff. There's another thing, I don't want to give the ending away to it, but it is definitely in the same style of Reanimator. The practical effects are insane in this movie. Totally on the level of The Thing from John Carpenter in 1982. The kills in this film are brutal. It holds nothing back. It hits on sexuality. It hits on so many things. That core group and all the films that they made, they like to do that visceral, practical gore in your face, and it is fantastic.
I remember that line. It ate him. It was so wild. The shape changing effects in that film were so twisted. Like a combination of The Thing and American Werewolf, and American Werewolf in London, and just it was a very visceral sensation. You definitely got a sense of the pain, a sense of the anguish there like that, but a lot of the joy in it as well. It was really, really twisted. That's why I love cosmic horror shit, especially Jeffrey Combs, who is amazing in everything he does.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like, you can see, because Reanimator being one of their first films, it's still good, but it had a much lower budget. It's like now they get some more money behind it, and they definitely invested money in practical effects. Definitely. The birthing scenes, crawling out of the creature and all other kinds of stuff are just like brutal.
What a great time in horror. Just the 80s.
Oh God, 80s horror. Thank you for that. We wouldn't be able to do what we did. We wouldn't be able to do this if we didn't have 80s horror.
True.
Oh yeah.
Well, moving forward. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. No, I agree. It's just that when you start, we get to an age before a lot of CGI and stuff like that can cover up a lot of things, where you had to make it and figure out how to work it.
You had to actually be creative.
I know. In a creative industry.
What a concept. God. That one came out 10/24, 10/25. Now, we got to go to a place in our lives that it's something that I'm going to be talking today, right now, about one of the original, I want to say one of the most prolific slasher films. Halloween came out 10/25, 1978. And I say most prolific, and I guess because it kind of started a whole era of this type of film, or more perfected it, I should say. And so Halloween came out. It got released. Halloween, if you've never seen Halloween, you've just missed out on horror in general. Jamie Lee Curtis, you got Donald Pleasance, all starting these roles. Jamie Lee Curtis was a teenager when this movie was shot, with her mom being previously in a movie directed by the same director. Her mom was in the 1960 Psycho, Janet Lee. Mm-hmm. And so bringing in Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Pleasance, starting off a run of some of the best movies out there, Halloween. And I guess I'm kind of holding back a little bit because I want to hear what you guys have to say about this movie before I even.
This is the go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, man.
Yeah, this is the movie that brought the mainstream slasher. Like, you had, I think, a couple of like proto slashers, and maybe Texas Chainsaw Massacre is maybe the first true slasher, the Tobe Hooper one. But this is like all the tropes that make a slasher movie is in Halloween, and it is done to perfection. The timing the movie came out, This was actually one of the very first movies to use a Steadicam with an opening shot where it's going through the house kind of thing. The
Right.
Steadicam I think had been around maybe a year or two. It's used very limited before that. And this is like, that's one of the iconic shots, the iconic start of the film. And this spawned every slasher movie since then.
So Halloween, the premise behind this whole movie was this guy as a kid kills his sister and gets locked up, and then it's something like 15 years later. And so the movie is based in 1978. So they released it like a couple of days before Halloween in 1978 to scare the crap out of everybody for that upcoming Halloween. And so when they open up, and so the whole premise is Michael Myers kills his sister, gets locked up, then he escapes in a prison transfer, and he takes off and he goes to this little town where Jamie Lee Curtis is living, and he starts just murdering everybody. Just really gets off to killing pretty much right away, and it doesn't stop. And so they went through this film, and it spawned some of the best and some of the worst movies from that point on. But you see kids even nowadays wearing Michael Myers masks, and not even seeing it, and that impacts the parents so much that they're dressing their kids up as the thing that scared them as kids. And I remember as a kid, I always wanted to see scary movies, but my dad wouldn't go watch them with me. He wouldn't take me to movies. He wouldn't watch scary movies on TV with me. And I always thought it was really weird because, I'm a big tough dad and he won't watch these scary movies. And I thought he just didn't like it. But it turns out, like, in the 70s, people were just, dropping acid left and right. And apparently that's not something you want to do before going to see Halloween.
I can see how that would go badly.
And so, that movie, I mean, being high on LSD probably didn't help, but that movie scared so many people so bad that it still affects him to this day. My dad's, he was born in 1961, and he still won't watch scary movies because of the experience he had in that theater. Just being so scared of something. So it's kind of cool that they went as far as they did, as early as they did, and then kept it rolling.
Yeah, the fact that...
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, whereas Texas Chainsaw in 1974, kind of went with the slasher genre, I can say that I would, it's pretty much considered that John Carpenter pretty much brought the slasher film to mainstream with Halloween 1978. And I think also birthed other genres. It gave us the Scream Queen.
Yeah.
It gave us the home invasion genre. It gave us the archetype, the almost Jungian characterization of Michael Myers, which would go to inspiring other masked killers. You could say that Carpenter was riffing off of Texas Chainsaw, but with having a masked killer like this. But the concept of being, I think, playing off of the notion of a more gritty realism of no motive. This is simply what this guy is. That whole Donald Pleasance monologue about the eyes of evil. Such a brilliantly delivered speech that just set the tone for the whole film. And obviously an epic franchise starter that I don't think that anybody's like. There's a whole library of information basically about behind the scenes. I have a friend who's a horror actor and absolutely loves this movie. And around this time, he's always posting up behind the scenes shots and behind the scenes tidbits about Halloween and about the making of process and everything that John Carpenter and his wife Deborah went through to get this thing made, and Jamie Lee Curtis's experiences, and the whole turning the William Shatner mask, the Captain Kirk mask, into the Michael Myers mask, which is a favorite. It was a favorite story about that film. But
yeah, because they painted it and dyed the hair and.
Oh yeah, just totally fucked with it because they couldn't, because what they originally had wasn't what didn't work. From respect to, they needed something quick, and their effects guy just happened to he found this mask, and just went to work on it, and lo and behold, there's the iconic white, pale white mask of Michael Myers, which I think was brilliantly brought back in the new one, in the Danny McBride Blumhouse production that just came out. I'm so glad we're going to get 2 more in that series.
That's good.
So
That's awesome.
An enduring legacy.
Hey, you know that mask was $1? So it was. The original mask was $1, and they just made it happen. So there was they gave a choice of 2 masks in the film, and when it came down to it, because one of them was like a clown mask, with like curly red hair, like a traditional. It was supposed to pay homage to him when he kills his sister. He's wearing a clown outfit. And so there was an option of the clown mask, which is like this, more expensive professional mask, and then this $1 Kirk mask that they just, totally messed up. And they chose the Kirk mask because the mask didn't show any emotion. And so instead of being a smiling clown, it was this emotionless face, which, it gets played off through the whole movie as this perfect terror, because you've got this killer who has no real motive to be killing the people that he's killing. He's just killing because that's, like what she said, what he does. And so just being in a normal suburban neighborhood, living your life, and running into this terror that is completely just devoid of emotion. There's no motive. There's no space for like a why me. It's just because. And that, putting that out right before Halloween when you're supposed to be letting your kids walk around. And
and that played into even the credits themselves, because Carpenter credited him as the Shape, instead of Michael Myers. Yeah, just the ethereal quality of just evil,
right,
walking about having to take human form in this one deal, in this one particular instance. But it definitely, like Jaws for the water, this definitely did for Halloween.
Absolutely.
It was
John Carpenter.
Was the movie.
It went so smoothly, and they filmed this in 20 days, and they ended up actually filming it out in it was like California or something, and the movie's supposed to take place, in the fall in Illinois, and so just having to deal with, they had to buy plastic leaves and paint them the colors that they wanted, and they reused those. And they wrapped it all up in 20 days. There's some shots in the movie that you can see palm trees, and the trees are all green, but all of a sudden there's all these leaves all over the ground in the backyard. And so, just having to be able to adapt, overcome, stay calm, keep this cast together, which everybody worked so well together. And, I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis was great, and a lot of her pull in that movie came from her mom previously working with him and being in that film beforehand. But I think it all came together so well, so smooth. Unfortunately, not all the movies in the series came together like that, but that it was done so well that you could watch it today and it would still be a relevant fear in people's eyes.
Yeah, I think
that's why I love the new one that just came out, that Blumhouse put out, because you could literally watch that first one and ignore everything in between. 2 through whatever, and go all the way up to the 2019 Halloween, and you only need those 2. And brilliance for Blumhouse and for Danny McBride and everyone around that to just continue the story from the first film.
Absolutely. And
really, really pay respect to John Carpenter and the work that John Carpenter did and the legacy that he has created.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We've talked about with some of these other directors like Sam Raimi and the Evil Dead series, is when you get somebody who's passionate about his project. It only had a budget of about $300,000, which is nothing in the movie world. That's nothing at all. And you make it work. They couldn't afford a symphony for the soundtrack, so John Carpenter just did it himself.
John Carpenter
kind of thing. And he took a lot of inspiration from Superio, which is an Italian horror film. There's just a certain level of passion, and maybe that's why a lot of the sequels have fell short, because as the sequels kind of feel like a cash grab for the franchise, this is like there was there was no franchise at this point. This was just John Carpenter who had an idea, and him and his wife working hard to get a movie made.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Let's see. All right, so moving on to our next film, which actually was released almost a year and 1 day later, is a movie called When the Stranger Calls. When the Stranger...
Oh, dude. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember this one. Definitely. Oh, this is a creepy one.
Yeah, you want to talk about in terms of like the home invasion movie, that kind of feeling, that kind of eeriness, movies that take place in reality, kind of thing that can happen to anybody, and this falls right into that category. It's directed by Fred Walton, right, and it stars Charles Durning and Carol Kane in it. And there's so many iconic moments. And this is basically, it talks about how a babysitter is babysitting his children. And then she goes and she gets a call. Have you checked on the children? Kind of thing, which already has like an eeriness of itself. Like, wait, what? How do you
Like,
know these
no,
people
but
know?
now I'm going to.
But it's like, I'm going to now, but maybe that's what the killer wants. Kind of thing.
Talk about not being in control of the situation.
Yeah.
Definitely one of the better films. One of the better films to play off of the urban legend, of the killers calling from inside the house. That
Calls coming from inside.
Calls coming from inside the house. Yes.
God, and it's, so yeah, like that would be absolutely terrible. And then what do you do? What do you do in that situation? Like, okay, well, I'm no longer going to be inside the house, so bye.
But you can't leave, the kids are there.
But you got the kids. And it's like, oh, man. It's damn kids, man.
It's not worth this $5
like, what do you
an
do?
hour and take off running.
You're so stuck in that situation that, like, that's what's scary about it. And you got to do something. You better figure it out.
Now, if I remember correctly, I haven't seen the movie in quite a while, but it was that first 20 or so minutes, that opening of the film, which I think is widely regarded as one of the scariest opening shots in any horror film.
Absolutely.
That it was that slow kind of move through the house, and Wes Craven paid homage to that with Scream, with the opening minutes of Scream.
Yep.
And you can see the influence of it in Scream, kind of thing. Because I always felt like Scream kind of took the best tropes and visited the best slasher movies, and then kind of congealed it into its own like slasher. And the first 10 minutes of Scream is When a Stranger Calls. That's where it comes from.
God, what? Yeah.
Such a classic that an urban folk legend of that was so long ago, of the babysitter and the man upstairs, has traversed time to that extent that it's still effective today. And I think a lot of our stuff, I mean, I think those urban legends, those old folk tales, scary folk tales, have just, they're going to be with us forever and constantly give us fantastic, ideas like When a Stranger Calls, and it's going to spawn even more. It's going to influence even further. I think that's why I love this genre. It just keeps building upon itself.
They redid When a Stranger Calls, didn't they?
And yeah, I mean, I agree. It's something that it can take these situations that we commonly find ourselves in and twist it on your head, because any girl could be babysitting. Any girl or guy could be babysitting. It's a job, something where preteens and teenagers can find themselves in all the time, kind of thing. And then just like that, it's like one phone call. Now it's one of the most terrifying experiences of your life.
Well, yeah. Now we've got
the idea of someone being, just the idea of someone being in the house that you're not aware of. Yeah.
That movie made such an impact at that time too. I was just looking at it. They did redo that movie in 2006.
And so just to give a little bit of like a couple of plot points in it. So it starts off with our main character, Jill, who is the one babysitting the children, and she starts getting that phone call, and she starts negotiating the situation, and they go and they find the attacker at this point, and they lock him up in an asylum and everything like that, and it seems to be okay. And then 7 years later, right, of course, Duncan the killer escapes, and he starts hunting people down, and you start seeing Jill, who had this experience when she was a teenager and now she's an adult and she has her own children, and then he comes back. So now it's even more terrifying because not someone else's kids, it's your own kids. And then the calls coming from within the house.
Definitely some trappings of Black Christmas in there too.
Oh, definitely. I think they came out around. I think Black Christmas came out later this year, something like that.
Well, that was a remake. I think there's another one coming out, but I think the original one. I think that original was also s1e4. Yeah, it was just October 11th. So I think it definitely fed off that concept of someone being in the house. And then the villain returning to the scene of the crime.
Yeah, unfinished business kind of thing.
Like,
and
leave
then
these poor people alone, dude. Seriously.
Exactly. Exactly. There was a remake that came out in 2005, 2006, but you have to pay homage to the original on this one.
Absolutely.
The 2006 remake with the when she's got the Motorola Razr, just to really connect with the kids on that one. Which kind of takes away from the whole landline thing, but at the same time, they still triangulate the call and it's coming from inside. Well, yeah. You haven't seen this movie? It came out
Well, that's the messed up thing, is that when you have rotary phones and alternative and basically going off different lines, I could see someone pulling it off that way. But with that one, yes, we've triangulated the call. It is pinging off a cell tower within 100 yards of your house. We're not 100% sure exactly where, but
well, that's why the house was so big in the remake, was because they had to cover that whole triangulation. So they really worked it in there, man.
Technology is killing us.
We need bigger houses, bigger and bigger houses.
More places to run.
Oh, like a very classic chiller. Really, really, and I love Carol Kane to death. She is so fantastic in everything she does.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we also have some birthdays this week. Some 3 fantastic birthdays. I think the guys that we love the most. Born October 20th, 1958, was Viggo Mortensen, the man who will be Aragorn.
Yes.
But we bring him up because he actually, early in his career, started in a couple. Had a few. He has a few horror films under his belt. He was Satan in the Prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
And with Christopher Walken, who's played Gabriel, and arguably it was up there. His depiction, even though it was just towards the end of the film and it was a small segment, he threw himself into that, and I think his portrayal of Satan goes up there with Al Pacino in Devil's Advocate. Okay. So, because he threw his usual method, everything into this depiction. Absolutely fantastic actor. I absolutely love Viggo in all of his work.
Oh yeah! Happy birthday, Viggo!
Happy birthday, Viggo Mortensen.
Birthday. Coming up a couple days after. You know what? Actually, let me go back to October 20th. I'd like to say happy birthday to my mom. She's.
Happy birthday!
October 20th. Happy birthday!
So love you, Mom. And then coming up a couple days after that. No, not after. I can't say that out loud. Give away her age. No, I'm just kidding. 10/22, 1952. One of the most versatile actors on the planet, Jeff Goldblum. Happy birthday to him. Man, he's getting up there for sure, but he's done so many things in his career, and like you say, versatile doesn't even you wouldn't even be able to describe this man, but movies that he would be most known for, I think, in the horror industry, if you've seen it, The Fly, a movie in which, mad scientist decides he's going to try to do some crazy stuff. What was his teleportation, right?
His teleportation.
Yeah. And so, he makes a teleport machine, and then the fly flies in, and, everything's okay until it's not, and he starts to become more fly-like as the cells break down, and so, I mean, that was a great movie. An earlier movie for him, for sure, and then obviously coming up on Jurassic Park and Independence Day, Death Wish, I think, was one of the earlier films that he was in long time ago. Movie where, God, it's been so long, but there was essentially it was like a breaking, entering, murdered his wife type film.
Oh wow! I mean,
but yeah, that was back in like '74, so it was one of his earlier movies. And then I mean, just that stretch.
I'll always remember Cronenberg's The Fly, because that probably his best body horror film ever, and Jeff Goldblum, Gina Davis, were so fantastic in that movie, and yeah, definitely a classic horror. Really, really good take on that. Kind of really broke the rules as far as conventional horror, what people were expecting and anticipating, and he brought all of his talent into that one. You could tell he really, really loved playing that role. He really enjoyed it.
That was so different at the time too.
Pushing the limit, yeah.
You get into everything we were talking about today, kind of that 70s, 80s slasher, you got these killer movies and stuff, and then you kind of break off into this, scientific type horror, which is real cool to see at the time. And you don't even see too much of from that point on until later on. So definitely ahead of his time.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Happy birthday, Jeff.
Happy birthday, Jeff Goldblum.
And we have one more birthday today. It's Cary Elves, born October 26, 1962. Obviously people know him from movies like The Princess Bride and Robin Hood Men in Tights, but he also has been in a lot of impactful horror movies, including the original Saw, which helped kind of start that torture porn genre that started popping up in the mid 2000s. He was in Saw 3D. He's actually in a movie that's in post-production right now that I'm kind of interested in. Is another remake of Black Christmas, which is supposed to come out either possibly later this year or early next year. So somebody who's been around for a long period of time. He has a lot of iconic characters and seems like one of the most friendly celebrities that's probably out there. Like I can't even picture him being mad or upset or anything like that. So.
Oh, I had an absolute blast back in my journalism days. I got to interview him when Saw for part of the Saw franchise, when his character came back after being gone for most of the series. But when he came back, I believe it was Saw 3D. I think it was the seventh.
Yeah, Saw 3D.
Yeah, when all of a sudden we realized the Doctor's been behind it the whole time, and I actually got to interview him for a little bit, and he was absolutely fantastic. Very difficult to steer a conversation towards horror when everybody in the gallery wants to talk about Princess Bride. It always comes back to that. But yeah, but I think, he was good in Saw. One of his creepiest roles was in Kiss the Girls with Morgan Freeman and Ashley Judd, because he was the Casanova killer in that. And I thought he was absolutely creepy as hell, because he went both sides, because you originally start out, you think he's a good guy, and this guy's going to help you get stuff done like that, and all of a sudden does the switch. Turns out he's the one he's the Casanova killer who's collecting humans and all this creepy stuff. But he had this moment where his demeanor switches and just changes on a dime, and really goes to show the strength of his capability and how versatile an actor he is as well. So, happy birthday, Cary Elwes.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
All right. And that wraps another edition of Week in Horror. We want to thank you all so much for listening. We really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe to us on SoundCloud as we drop a new episode every Sunday. You can also find us on Spotify as well. And check out our Facebook page to get your daily splatter, which is a bit of horror history every single day. Just follow us on the page. Thank you all so much again. We couldn't do it without your support.
I'm Eugene signing off.
This is JL.
I'm Alex.
And we will see you next week.